Welcome to the Museum of the African Diaspora. My name is Nia McAllister, and I'm the Senior Public Programs Manager here at MoAD. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the publication of For the Culture, Phenomenal Women and Femmes in Food by Klancy Miller. For the Culture is a must-have anthology of leading Black women and femmes shaping today's food and hospitality landscape, from farm to table and beyond, chronicling their passions and motivations, lessons learned, and hard-won wisdom, personal recipes, and more. Today's program is curated by our chef-in-residence, Jocelyn Jackson, and will feature a lively panel conversation between Klancy Miller, designer George McCalman, who designed this beautiful book, and Salimatu Amabebe, who is our Emerging Artist Program awardee, whose beautiful exhibition you are currently experiencing, Sun, and is one of the featured interviewees in this book as well. This program will include some interactive elements as well as a reception and time for book signing. As you may have seen when you came in, there are copies of For the Culture available downstairs, and if you have not gotten your copy yet, I highly encourage you to do so. I want to thank Kaiser Permanente for their generous support of our Chef-in-Residence program. Chef-in-Residence has been a program that's been thriving here at MoAD since 2015 as a platform for giving voice to issues around food justice in the diaspora. And it is now my honor to introduce our current Chef-in-Residence, Jocelyn Jackson, who will introduce the other brilliant panelists. Jocelyn Jackson is an award-winning chef, artist, teacher, and activist who was raised on the Kansas Plains by Tuskegee Airmen and the first Black woman to run for mayor in Wichita. She is the founder of Just Us Kitchen and the co-founder of People's Kitchen Collective. Both organizations serve to center the lived experience and liberation of Black and brown peoples using food, art, and social justice as vehicles for change. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. What a sweetness. Thank you, Nia. And I am delighted by the fact that all of you got a big yes to this moment, because although this is a book launch for this beautiful illumination called For the Culture, this is a celebration. This is a celebration of what it is for us to be in relationship with one another and uplift our stories into the heights of what is really necessary for us to be in relationship with one another, with integrity, with joy, and with all that's possible for this beautiful future we're building together. So thank you so much for being here for that as well. I am so grateful that Klancy Miller decided to come to the Best Coast and enjoy the time on the West Coast, first in LA and now here at MoAD, to talk about what it is to put together the vision of Black women and femmes in food in a way that really does speak to the human, the quality of all of us to be in the spirit of holding ourselves closely in the work that we do, in the communities that we build, and also in the spirit that we really want to carry forward in our communities and in ourselves. I don't speak lightly on what this book really does achieve when it comes to that. I'd like to introduce now Klancy Miller, who is also a wonderfully trained chef and has written several articles and a beautiful book that also talks about this incredible moment of what it means for food to be a part of how we express ourselves and make meaning in the world. Hello, my dear. Welcome. And I do want to also say that there is a really powerful transition that happened when Klancy decided to cultivate a magazine called For the Culture, an annual magazine that sold out in 24 hours, thank you very much. And it really was wanted, right? And that magazine translated into this project. And it was because of the foresight that Klancy had for filling a space that in many ways historically has been invisible. She took up this really important need in our community to bring the voices forward, to bring the experiences forward, and to be vulnerable in the way that she also brought her own lived experience into the lexicon of what it is to be Black women in food. So I'd like to introduce to you Klancy Miller. Hello, honey. Thank you. I'm going to do a little moment before you go to your chair. I want to point out something to you while Klancy is standing right next to me. Klancy did this. I don't mean a literal way. I mean she filled the inspiration of this altar that we have today. All of those portraits of ancestors are in the book that she created. These are moments of honoring where we are from and where we are possibly able to go, based on you having this presence of honoring ancestors in this amazing book that you created. So I just wanted to point that out before you go anywhere else, that they're here with us, that you made that happen, and that is part of our story forever. So thank you for this.
Thank you for creating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Klancy. Yeah, either way you want. And George is with us. George designed this book, y'all. George McCalman and McCalman Co. And it's really sweet to be able to know that George is in this Bay Area world with us and also in Grenada, and has taken it upon himself to do something that is an illumination as well. It's called Illustrated Black History. It is the amazing moment of knowing that your calling is so inspirited by your talent for design, your talent for storytelling, your talent for being able to express what something, it really is something that has never been done before, and took up that call, and really beautifully. And so I'm really grateful that George is here to share his perspective of this project and being in the design process, but also it really is this co-creative imagination. There are many people doing the work of bringing our stories forward, and I'm so glad that George's imagination was in on this project as well. George, please join us. Thank you, my dear. So sweet. Either way, yeah. And what I'd like to say is that we are going to, I'm going to just prep you as to what you will could expect. We are going to start this conversation between these two young sweethearts, and we're going to go ahead and have a moment of really diving into what this project is, was, and can be. And we are so excited to be able to have a little second part of our conversation with a special guest, who you may already know about. I think Leah told you. But we will take a moment to invite an even bigger opportunity for us to see what is possible when it comes to this book and what it tells us is possible in our lives. So we'll start here, but there's more. I am going to bypass this step that looks like it's a trap, and I'll go over here. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. Oh my goodness. Thank you, thank you. I am so pleased that you all are here, and I really want to honor the fact that you have been on this tour for just over a week and a half.
Mm-hmm. Like this is actually starting the second. Well, I don't know. It's day 12.
There we go. It's day 12.
Yeah.
And so I point that out because I want to honor the fact that this is a really dynamic experience of you telling your story in a variety of different ways based on the place and the people that you interact with. And so I'm really grateful. You're just mentioning you all are East Coast, West Coast connected. Where you are, you find each other. I want to know how that played out for you as you're thinking about this magazine is becoming a book. What is this dynamic difference or shift when you imagine this from magazine to a book?
So I think it's important to mention exactly how the magazine morphed into this format of the book. In 2020, after George Floyd was murdered, Black people in many fields, specifically creative fields, became temporarily popular. And so my publisher, who had published my first book, Cooking Solo, reached out to me and asked if I would do a book with them. And at the time, I was working on bringing the first issue of For the Culture, a magazine celebrating Black women and femmes, to life. And so they had an idea of a Black history cookbook. and it didn't resonate with me. And I said, I'm working on this magazine. If I do a book right now, I would like for it to be a reflection of this magazine. So there are lots of interviews in the first issue. So I was saying basically I would envision a book of interviews, recipes, because I did want it to be cookbook-y, and personal essays by me about culinary matriarchs no longer here. And so that is specifically how the book came to be published.
That's right.
So yeah.
And that is crucially important. It really was a moment in time that was captured by the possibilities that weren't present before that moment.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking. And that's why I'm so grateful that this beauty is a result of so much heartbreak, that we're able to transmute these moments into life where there was the initiation is based in something that is so incredibly tragic.
Absolutely.
And that's why it feels so important, that I pointed out, all of these ancestors, whether they're new or not, they're really on our side for being in a moment where we can tell these stories in a more powerful, present, and, quite frankly, more expansive way. And what is that moment for you of translating these ideas of, like you said, from magazine to book was the moment that you were really having to decide how this is going to be a different expression. What was that shift powerfully for you between what do I want to say with this book that wasn't able to be said with this magazine? And how did George come into that moment for you?
So I wanted to, for going back to the magazine, when I started the crowdfunder to fund printing it, my little video said, Toni Morrison said, write the book you want to read. So that was my motivating motto, mantra in creating the magazine, and that translated to the book. I wanted to create a book that I would have wanted to have had at my fingertips when I was 21, when I was just getting out of college, when I knew I was interested in food but didn't know what was available. I wanted to show the expansiveness of Black women and femmes in food and hospitality, and I also wanted to show, in a practical sense, options. Like there are options. You can have an interest in this field and have numerous options and look at all these incredible people who are expansive in their lives and what they bring, their personal passions and talents, what they bring to the plate, the page, museum walls. Like there are so many blueprints for us that have been created and lived by Black women and femmes. And so I wanted to put that just in book form.
Yes, and that was the opportunity to really be dynamic in that way. And it really does, I think, say a lot that there is something personal in the way that you designed this, George. Because what you just said is something that needed to be on the page, both in word and in visual. So it's really powerful that we know many of the same people, and a lot of them put their hands into this book, right? And there was so much care in the storytelling, the interviews that you created, and the reflection through the recipes that people selected, right? And I'm wondering, what was your position when you came to know, oh, this is what it is? You know what I mean? Like there is a really, a specific moment that I think that you as the designer, you come into a project with, having worked with you before. And it's almost a channeling that happens. And I would love for you to speak to that part.
So I was saying to someone earlier, kind of summing up what I do, I design things for Black people. And I have made it my mission for the last few years to be singularly focused on that. And it has blossomed into a lot of different things. But specific to this project, what I try to do and what I generally try to do is to channel the origin point, which is the author. And one of the best compliments, I was in New York last week for Klancy's launch, and several people who were in attendance said the same thing. I'm being understated. Everyone said the same thing. This book looks and feels like Klancy. And that's what it was for. You know, I wanted the book to not feel like I designed it. I wanted the book to feel like Klancy designed it. And I'm focused on this because Black authors deserve, I'll say it, more care right now than anyone. And so I am the strong arm. I play the role of a caregiver, custodian, but also asshole.
Consigliere.
Yes. Yeah, because I know what happens behind the scenes, and I know
An advocate.
I know why we have not been cared for, and so I'm there as a conduit, just to make sure that the vision of the author is in every single page of any book that I happen to be working on, or anything else, any other initiative. One thing I will say, the very first time Klancy and I spoke, I remember saying to her, I'm not sure I am the right person to be doing this. Shouldn't it be a woman designing this book on women and femmes? And I remember the conversation where I got off the phone and I felt settled about that, because I always litigate my own involvement in anything I'm doing all the time. Like, am I representing the original conversation? And I litigate that within myself throughout the entire process, just to make sure that I am honestly representing the origin point all the way to the end point. And I feel that my presence was necessary.
1,000%. Also, you were on my dream list. Like, yeah, the thing that happened that felt miraculous is that George was the number one person who I wanted to design the book. In the first meeting with the publisher, they said, "Oh, we've been in contact with George McCalman." I was just like, really? That was like the best thing they did.
Yeah.
The best decision.
The only.
Yeah, yes.
With
That was,
clarity.
yeah, just like, oh, that was the strongest, best decision in the whole from that perspective.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. And
Yeah.
there's also a partnership that happened in the visual world. How many people have already seen the book? Have the book? Yes. Good decisions, good choices.
Yay.
There are portraits throughout. How did that choice get made? And that artist is incredible.
Yes, she is.
Sarah Madden is amazing, a genius. So that was a point of
Tell the story.
conflict.
Tell the story.
That was a point of conflict because I was very like, I want there to be photographic portraits of everyone, and I feel very strongly about that. And George was like, let me tell you why that's not going to work. Because for those of you who have the book and for those of you who don't have the book, people are in the book on the west coast of Africa, a couple of countries in Europe, throughout the US, in the Caribbean. So from a practical level, there's that. And their budgets, you know, I mean, I got a larger budget for this book than I did for my first book. That was $24,000 for my first book. This book was bigger, but it wasn't like, you need $1 million budget for that kind of
Undertaken.
yeah. And so George, I'll let George take over, but George was like, that's not going to work. Let me tell you what will work. And so, yeah.
Well, I was also, Klancy was at an event at the 92nd Street Y a week and a half ago. And it was interesting seeing the audience watching you describe that, how we came to that point. And often as the designer, I have to give the person I'm working with bad news. that the thing that they have in mind is not the thing that we have the money for or the resources for. But my job is not just to give someone bad news, it's to give them a solution. That's the most important thing that I bring to any project that I'm doing. I have to come with a solution, not just a problem. And so in this case, I knew that it was another opportunity to frankly have another woman in the process, and that would represent the essence of each of the incredible women and femmes across the diaspora, but it had to be someone who would soulfully represent also Klancy's vision. And so I presented one of two artists to Klancy, and she loved the both of them. And the first artist that we were initially going to go with ended up backing out. And it was just cosmic. It worked out perfectly. And then Sarah ended up not just wanting to do it, but pouring her soul into these portraits. And at the launch last week, it was amazing to watch people see themselves for the first time, too.
Yeah.
And to see people saying, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's gorgeous, and that's what it feels like. It's a testament in that way, too. Many people recently have been really referring to this experience of Black folks are often given their history through surveillance instead of observation. Pause on that for me. Surveillance instead of observation. And these portraits are such a beautiful reflection of us looking at one another and insisting on being regarded. Okay? Because that is a big piece. I feel like you just Zora Neale Hurston this, is what I'm saying. Like, there was a major anthropological moment that happened in your book, not only with the interview questions, but also with this insistence that everyone is able to be seen and heard. And I love that that was visually represented. I love this composition of the questions. Can you tell us about that behind the scenes? These questions, who got asked them before they were even asked to others? Like, what was that process for you when you're doing this behind the scenes of even doing the set dressing and doing the photographs? Like, are these questions coming up, I imagine, as you're doing all this process? Tell me about that.
You mean the questions for the actual interviews? So in the magazine, I had taken some inspiration from the Proust questionnaire, which used to be a parlor game in like the early, I guess in the 19th century. Tell me what you are, tell me what your dreams are, and things like that. Your fears, your greatest joys. And so I wanted to kind of, I don't know, make them more specific to food, but also more specific to people's professional paths in food. So I took some of the questions in the magazine, and then I also wanted to ask about, I wanted the basic question to be, how would you describe what you do? And then, how did you begin? And then I also wanted to throw in questions about mental health, because I feel like hospitality can be such a brutal field for anyone in any area of the service industry, in any area of hospitality. So I wanted to ask how people deal with that. Do they? That was also an interesting question to really listen to the vast array of responses, and money, because I'm always interested in money.
Have to.
Yeah, I don't know.
The transparency.
Transparency, and also just like, how are you making
do you do
it?
it?
Yeah. So that's there were things I was generally curious about personally, and then things that I thought would be good to open up the conversation and share paths with people.
And so one of the interesting things, we'll get back to this in a more personal way in a little later. But in this moment, one of the things you reference is that this is a global book. In your research, which I think this book is also, what was the variety of response based on lived experience, whether it be the demographics of many variables of lived experience, right? But did you find that there were trends that played out Did you find that there was variety based on geography or age or, any of those things? What were your findings when you combined all together these responses from around the world?
I think what I found is that a lot of people, and this was really inspiring, are trying to build their lives, trying to make lives that are fulfilling, and therefore trying to make their careers shape their lives. I guess, in other words, people are trying to have more peace, more joy, more rest, more of a sense of fullness. And that I found really fascinating and inspiring, to see people shape how they work, to have, their work be kind of filled with more value, and to be supportive of their lives. That being said, there's also like the grappling with money and with mental health, and trying to have that fullness, with sometimes some obstacles.
That's right. And that leads me to think about, you also made this collective, co-creative decision about the recipes that were included and why. And I'd love to know more about that, because the design element is fascinating when it comes to how you reflected these recipes.
That was actually one of the simpler things. I asked everybody if they would be willing, or I asked almost everybody if they would be willing to contribute a recipe, and some people said yes. So whatever they wanted to contribute, I said yes to.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That feels like the ease that's being requested too.
Exactly.
And the book is equally, there's a very specific sparseness to some of the images, but always lush and rich, right? And is that part of what you were working on too when you were into this?
So there's an aspect of the design of the book that converged really beautifully. The photographer, Kelly Marshall, who is probably the photographer I work with the most these days, because she has one of the most impressive ranges. I've been an art director for almost 30 years, and there are very few photographers who can shoot everything and anything. And a lot of photographers will tell you that they can, but they're lying. And Kelly just has an innate sense of how to calibrate. We're very similar in that way. We know how to calibrate our skills for who we're working with. And we can move our egos to the side to make sure that the person is being represented. And so the photography had to feel like Klancy too. And I'll tell you, there are two cookbooks that are coming out this month that Kelly and I worked on together. Klancy's is one of them, and Yewande Komolafe is the other.
And she'll be here February 3rd.
Yes, yes. And those books both, look, you could not tell that we did both of them, because what Kelly did with Yewande's book is completely different. And they were photographed around the same frame of time too. And so one of the origin points we used for the culture was realizing that both Klancy and Kelly had spent time in Paris around the same time, and that their love of Paris had really informed their love of food. And the kind of Black focus, the Black gaze through Paris was what we were going to use as the model. And so that informed a lot of how we approached shooting the food, that we let a lot of natural light come in, shadows, essence, ephemera, just really kind of like light, dappled light. There's a lot of these images where you can turn the page and they look pretty, and then you come back and you see that there's a meditation in them. That is not, a lot of food styling can be really aggressive. They just want your mouth to salivate on every single thing. And that's not always necessary. And so we wanted to create a complete language. When Kelly and I were talking about the art direction for it, and basically wanting to still focus on Clancy's, Paris, her love of Paris, and the kind of evocative time that both Kelly and Clancy had, that was the thing we were trying to capture.
Right. Oh, that's so powerfully stated because, you have something you want to add to that, I think.
Well, I was just remembering you're talking about on set, like, we want this to have a lived-in look, and I didn't know what that meant, but seeing the photos, I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also, this is just kind of background. I love explaining the process because you can look at a cookbook and you're like, oh, that looks pretty, but then there's the work of it. And so Clancy found this incredible townhouse in Greenwich Village that a friend of hers, acquaintance, and we basically took over 2 floors of this 5-story unit that one family lived in. And we photographed, like, in the middle of the pandemic for a week. And we basically just moved in, took over, and the entire home felt like it was in Paris. And so we found spots, usually there's a studio set, you find one area and you shoot everything in the general area. We just kept moving around this entire house. And it's reflected in the photos. It's not a set; it's an actual home that this book was photographed in, and it shows also.
Yeah, shout out to Allie Kane. She is a really generous, wonderful human being and excellent food friend. And I was just asking her because we were trying to figure out, all right, we've got this budget. How do we figure out the photo shoot in a way that works with the budget? And Allie has a company that makes sauces, and she's done a cookbook. So I was like, and she used to own a really sweet cafe in Chelsea. And I was like, do you know of any studios that are inexpensive? And she's like, oh, you can use my house. So I was just like, and I had been to her house before, so I was like, are you kidding me?
You knew what that was.
Yeah, it's like a stunning, stunning home. So the fact that she just opened it, it's just like, yeah, just, 9 to 5, whatever you need during the day, just, yeah, it's yours. So that was a miracle.
That's some beautiful generosity. And
Yeah.
I feel like you are, in this project manifested so much of that. Very purposefully, it feels like. And, I want to invite our next person to come up and join us because I feel like this is another expression of that generosity and on-timeness. And, it's just the serendipity of connection that happened with this project. And I'd love, Salimatu, first of all, there needs to be a moment where everyone just takes a look around the room before I say another word. Just take a look around this room. This is the space where emerging artists exhibit their work, and the emerging artist for this moment is Salimatu. Yes to that. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you.
And there was major patience, like I was having all this anticipation, but Salimatu's coming next, like that. And the reason why there is this moment of intentional focus is because something really special is happening right now. We are able to see this beautiful intersection of Salimatu being in the book as an interviewee, providing a recipe that is behind this curtain and we'll eat in a little bit, and also really living into this practice of art and food and social justice playing out in concert with one another. So it feels really important for us to have this intentional moment of focusing on what that is, what it needs, what it looks like. And I would love for you to speak about that intersection for you in your life right now, as you were going through the book process with Klancy. Like, how is that all coming together for you?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yes,
is
big
this
question.
Is this on? Can
Yes,
people hear me?
you're good.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let me start with the intersection of food
Yeah.
and art. I think that's a good place to start. So I worked as a chef for the last 10 years. And I also, my background is in visual and performing arts. So that's something that came about purely through like a need, which was like the need to support myself and have money. And so while I was studying art, while I was making art, I wanted to learn a trade. I wanted to learn something that could travel with me. And so I started working in kitchens, and because I loved cooking, I loved food. And so then I was kind of figuring out how to navigate those worlds of food and art and where I wanted to situate myself in all of that. And so after getting kind of burnt out from working in kitchens and working in fine dining spaces and pop-up spaces, I started a project called Black Feast, which is a food event celebrating Black artists and writers. And so this was something that I started back when I was living in Portland, Oregon. And I started it as a way of just bringing Black folks together around food in this space, because I was tired of looking out over like these 4-course pop-up dinners and not seeing any of my friends there. And the more that I kind of moved into this world, my friends started dropping off because I used to do, donation-based dinners and stuff that was more community-centered. And then as soon as I started kind of moving into this world of fine dining, it no longer became something that people who worked in the food and restaurant industry could afford to come to. It was also at a time when I probably couldn't afford to come to my own dinners. So, so I started Black Feast as a way of kind of merging that interest in art and my own art practice and celebrating other Black artists. And so I started making meals, and each dish was inspired by the artist's work. And so that was also another way of digesting someone's work, of thinking about what are kind of the founding principles and the dynamics that are happening in Black artists' work, and then how can you translate that into a meal, into a dish, and then share that with people. So that's something that I started in 2016, and it still continues on, lives on, has had a lot of different iterations throughout the pandemic, but something that I continue hosting.
Oh, that's incredible. And from the interview that was done in the book, it feels, Klancy, if you could speak to that process of being witness and also being, it's like a role of being a reflector as you are collecting these stories together. So as you were selecting, the folks that you were reaching out to, the people that were included in the book, what is this convergence moment specifically that you're seeing? Having composed this book and having seeing a body of work, it's so dynamic to see your book in the world, and examples of that. Can you speak to that part?
Well, I can say I was a fan. I was a fan, so I was like, I have to get Salimatu in the book. So I was really happy when you said, yes, you were willing to be interviewed. And so that was just, it made my inner fan very happy. And then I really was, I was blown away by a lot of what you said. And also absolutely love the palm nut cheesecake. That's one of my favorite recipes in the book. But yeah, so it's kind of meeting people you're a fan of. That was a large part of the book. And then it's really fascinating for me to see. First of all, it's amazing to be in this room.
Yes.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so in awe of you. I can't wait to go and look and read. But I'm proud of you, and I'm so amazed by your talent and expansiveness and all you're able to do. So thank you for being you.
Make me cry.
I'm serious. I'm just like, wow. We had a whole moment. Was it last summer? You were in New York?
Yeah,
And that was just like, oh my gosh, because the interview was done over Zoom, I think. And so, yeah, just kind of that feeling over and over again. Oh my goodness, this is so cool. You're so cool. And I have had that with numerous people in the book. And then also to see how from the book, I basically wrote the book from end of 2020 to I'll say definitely all of 2021, little end of 2020, maybe the beginning of 2022. It was like a 2.5-year project. And so it's been very interesting to see people's lives change. So what is on the page, in many cases, there's a version of that, but people have continued to create, and people are thankfully still living, and so people are continuing to evolve. So it's been an interesting process to see dynamic people be dynamic and change their lives and expand and shift and do all of that. I don't know if I answered the question.
You really did.
Okay,
you
good.
totally did. Because that's what it feels important when we were initially having a conversation about this. It was very much, this is not a static project.
Yeah.
This isn't a book that simply rests on a table. It's something that lives and is its own version of a call to action. And so when I see that possibility that it includes, this is an invitation from your design to be in the space with the conversation, with the food and the stories that are brought forth from that exchange. I wonder if there's a way that we can even speak to specifically this project. It's called Sun. How is this a resonance of the work that started, over time, incremental? It's like, I see what I'm doing. I see what my story is. I see what my ability to take up spaces. How can you speak to this project specifically as a reflection of that, that timeline? It's just like, it's incredible to me to see that.
You want a thesis? Okay. I can answer that and probably take a roundabout way of getting there. Because I think that this piece in particular is a lot about memory and how it lives in our bodies. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it has to do with looking into the past through, there's a video piece that's normally projected back here. I'm looking at kind of archives and archives around movement and thinking about masculinity, thinking about gender, and also how we learn ourselves through the people around us. And so a lot of that is looking at archives of my father and seeing how he lives in my body, actually, and thinking about how choreography is about this repetition of movement again and again until it lives in our body, and that many things can be thought of as a choreography. And I think in many ways food is also a choreography, and I like to talk about food and cooking in terms of dancing, because that's often how it feels for me, is the process of listening to the ingredients the same way you're listening to music, and understanding what needs to come next based on this choreography of doing again and again and again. So that's kind of how I would connect these. But also in terms of, memory, it's interesting to think of, the interview as part of an archive too. It is this living archive. And when I got my copy of the book, thank you. It was such a wild experience to be sort of transported back to this time of speaking with you, which was also like a really rough time. And the things that I was saying were very real and also very heavy, you know, around care, and you asking like, how are you taking care of yourself? And I'm like, oh, it's just like, I'm not. Like, I'm hanging on by a thread, you know, but to actually have that be sort of documented in a cookbook, it becomes this document of that time, of those years, for so many people and all of these things that we were experiencing. And so I just really want to thank you for that, because that's such a beautiful thing to exist in the world. And I just want to see it like continue on.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Wow.
That's really beautiful, and what you said there felt so important to say again, which is this is almost an instinct for tracking these memories. You know, what you said about this exhibition here, what you're saying about the book and what it can mean and what it does mean. What does it mean to be one of the people responsible for holding our memories as a culture?
I'll go real personal with this. My mom recently died. My mother died in March, and she died of Alzheimer's, which affects the memory. And I didn't think about that. I mean, I think about my mom every day, and I would think about her every day while I was writing the book, but I wasn't, or doing interviews, I wasn't thinking about memory. I think I was thinking about the fact that I believe Black women and Black femmes have stories that need to be told and centered and kept. And now, linking it back to my mom, like, I do see the importance of memory, the importance of holding on to time periods and stories and what was happening and writing it down, you know? So I don't think of myself as a holder of that, but I do value that, you know? I value stories, narratives, and documenting things that are happening and stories that are unfolding. So I think it's important to me personally, and maybe it's become more important over the past year. It's not something I walked into this project thinking, oh, this is about memory, but I see that now also.
I mean, that's a big part of this experience too. A project like this, and any cookbook, any book really, is a forward propulsion, you know? So I'd love to hear what that reflection is from each of you of, now we're in retrospect and it's coming into the world. It's something that you did in the past, but it's living presently from so many more perspectives from people that are interacting with it. They often say an artwork isn't complete until it interacts with the audience. So what are you learning in this moment? This was done a long time ago for you. And now it's getting another oomph.
Do you want to start with me or with George or me? What does it mean now? Or
Yeah,
going
given this experience of having created this in the past, it was done, you were, complete, but now it's meeting the audience again in a new way. So what's the learning as you're going on this tour of perspectives of other people on the project, your own perspective changing, seeing it, like you said, in a different way with a little bit of time and a little bit of input from other people? Like, what is it that's going on in this moment as you launch?
Honestly, I feel a huge sense of relief. I'm really just glad it's out.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's off of my computer, off of my editor's computer, off of George's computer. Like, it's out. Like, we don't have to email about it anymore. It was a project, a labor of love, but it's nice. People use the term paper baby for good reason, because there is a gestational process. And with a book, this started in 2020. So it's nice to have it out.
Yeah.
So I feel a huge sense of relief and gratitude. gratitude that it is complete, gratitude that it's out, gratitude at each person who has a positive interaction with it. It's been really great. You know, the 5 events I did in New York last week and the 2 events in LA and here, it's really great seeing people with curiosity about it. That's the best part, frankly. I am hugely grateful for just people being interested in the book, and then to see people interact with it and to think of it in ways that I hadn't thought of. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So I feel a sense of exhilaration and gratitude and relief.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you, George?
I think about these things through the 2 sides of my brain.
Yeah.
I am a designer. I run a design studio, and so they're very kind of tangible things. But I'm also a fine artist, and then the conversations become more intellectual and ephemeral. And I can move back and forth in the conversation, but I also embody the intersection, or the overlap, rather, in between that. And I was thinking as you were speaking, Salimatu, that what is unique about, I don't call the books that I've designed for the Black authors that I've worked with books. I've been calling them cultural artifacts for years, because they're not just books. We're just super casual about this kind of language, and these books are all firsts. They're all firsts. Bryant's book, Nicole's book, Clancy's book, Yawande's book. I'm working on a few right now also, first. And so then they come out into the world and everyone's like, oh, it's a book. And I'm always like, no, it's not just a book. This is a collection of our stories that are still relatively new that it's taking this form. And I don't want the average person just grabbing it and rifling through it and putting it back. I was like, you better not just put that back, because this is telling something that we've all just kind of taken for granted that we don't see. And so you better stop and represent and recognize that these are all, this form that it's taking is still pioneering. Clancy made a pioneering book. Yawande made a pioneering book. It's the first of its kind. Bryant's book, pioneering. And it's out in the world, and so we all just kind of get to be, flim-flammy about it. But it's really important that we are speaking about it from this vantage point, that it's an archive, it's a document, it's its own collected film, it's a filmography, it's a lot of different things in one sitting. And so many of the women and femmes in Clancy's book are not just pioneers, they're also polymaths. And that is also something that that word isn't relegated enough. That out of survival, so many of the subjects in this book have had to learn different practices. It's uncommon that there is a chef and fine artist in one sitting, and you make it look easy, but we know it's really not. And it's also really uncommon that you have both of those practices that you hold. It's really uncommon how Clancy has worked. It is uncommon how I work and who I am and what I do and the way that I do it. And so it's really important to represent these pieces of this, also the hidden stuff that's not really obvious to everyone.
Beautiful set. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Cultural artifacts, y'all. Get into it. Did you have a response to how you are experiencing something new from a project that has been completed already? Is there more that has come up for you as you've interacted with this project being launched?
I mean, I feel like like I said before, you know, it kind of is, it's a lot to reflect on when I read back over, you know, like a time. It starts to encapsulate kind of like a time that was really intense.
Truly.
Really intense, and a lot of pain and struggle was happening. And also so many beautiful things were coming out of that time too. This book being one of them. So, yeah.
I love that this book can hold that, you know. That feels really important for a book to exist in that kind of complexity. And for us to have a purposeful intention for that in these projects, because I already know both of y'all have your next projects in mind. You too. Like there is a burgeoning collection in all of us. It's not one and done ever. And it's very much because of that tradition of being multidisciplinary, being, as they say, containing multitudes. It's an insistence. It's an internal insistence. And I want to get our folks here in the chairs involved in that part of the conversation as well. We have a few pieces of paper we're going to share with y'all. These pieces of paper. Hello, people that came in. I am grateful for all I think you used the word interrogations. I think there's also this idea of how questions can be more than what is actually asked that happens in your book. That it can be holding so much more than what is said. It's holding a moment and a memory. So I wanted you all real time to be able to interact with some of these questions from the book. And we have a few of those to hand out to you. We'll go front to back, back to front, yeah. And if you could select one, and there's a pin for you as well. What we're going to do is really do a living book together. We're going to do a moment where all of you are able to reflect on some of these questions that are in this book and see what Klancy was describing, that this isn't one-dimensional. This is a three-dimensional inquiry into what it is to be Black women in food. It's a real opportunity for reflection on practical things, on emotional things, on what we've learned and how we can share that knowledge and wisdom. Because don't forget, it started with these ancestors. I believe every single one of them had an answer to these questions that you asked. So I'd like us to be in that inquiry together, real time, so that we can get even more of that juicy wisdom. I think they are moving through. People are coming in contact with them. Great. Thank you for doing that, Nia. So I would love to have a volunteer who has received one of these cards in front of you. What's the question on your card? And we have a mic if you need a mic. Thank you, my dear. Thank you. I'm just literally
First, I'd like to say thank you for your brilliance.
I'm gonna interrupt.
Yeah,
I was like, oh no, you are not just sneaking in.
Exactly. Thank
Listen, everyone needs to know this is one of the most important artists in the Bay Area right here in our presence. Lava Thomas. Everyone know her name.
Yes.
I actually just came from the library this afternoon where your piece on Dr. Maya Angelou that all of you should know about is in the process of being fabricated. Lava's also one of my favorite people on earth.
Yay.
And this is a really
George.
important, powerful human being in our presence here.
Agree. Thank you for taking that moment.
I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, let me just take a moment to recover myself after that. Thank you for your brilliance, your generosity, and for holding the memories, the labor, the dreams of our ancestors and sharing them all with us. My question, what brings you joy? And what would you like to experience more of? I love to dance.
Yes, yes.
I love the people that I love. I love conversations that make me think, and I love conversations that make me feel. I love my people, and that extends to the people who look like me, who almost look like me, and some people who don't look like me at all. I love being here. I love being in community. I really love my family. Memories of my grandmother bring me the most joy of all. Thanks.
Thank you, Lava. Oh, so beautiful. I had someone else back here in the back raise your hand. If you want to raise it again, we'll find you. Beautiful. Absolutely.
Sure. So yeah, I also had the what brings you joy question and what would you like to experience more of. I love to roller skate, similar to dancing. I would love to do more of that. In my life at the moment, I grew up on the East Coast, so I've been out here in the Bay for a few years, and just in being away from family, I don't have a ton of, or I guess I haven't built community yet that allows me to be around elders in a way that I'm used to, Black elders in particular. So I'm in the process of trying to do more of that because that's something that brings me joy, for sure.
Oh, sweet. Thank you so much for that.
That's sweet.
Oh, right here. Hi, honey.
I was actually just applauding, but I might as well speak. Hi, everybody. I'm Phyllis, and of course, it's an honor to be in this space and to listen to such beautiful people that I'm getting to know, and those that I know that I love, they know who they are. My question is, how do you take care of your mental health and deal with the stresses of your work? I was meant to pull this, and I did randomly just pull it. I didn't do how some people did. So what I said, and then I'll add to this, always being and living in the moment. Always being and living in the moment. Whether I'm at the stairs of City Hall for reparations, whether I'm fixing, healthy, anti-inflammatory food for my community, for my show. This is what mental health is about for me. Therapy, therapists, and having tools to recognize my trauma and how to release stress living intentionally. One of the things that therapy over decades have taught me is my gut. I already know, it always starts in my gut before I get triggered, someone says something, and then I can take a breath. I can literally take a breath, and I have a Rolodex of tools. Do I address it? Do I let it go? Do I think about something pleasant? Or do I breathe and say, this is a moment I have to speak up about injustice? And it has literally lowered my blood pressure, and I'm off of blood pressure medicine and high cholesterol medicine. For mental health is everything.
Yes. Thank you. And you can pass forward right there. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Nia. Thank you. I learned quite a lot today. I wasn't ready to be in church. But my question was also about mental health and how I deal with the stresses of work. I do work that I had always wanted to do, but life forced me to make other decisions. I just started taking classical guitar lessons, and I realized that when I moved from Nigeria under different circumstances, my parents had exposed me to all sorts of musical instruments, and something froze from age 8 to 34. And recently, returning to that and that choreography, my memory is trash now from football. But I find that my body's really good at remembering if I give it a chance to go through the process. And so when you were talking about the choreography, I was like, oh, okay, there's hope for this brain. But returning to music has been really good. And I don't care if it's 2 o'clock and I got a meeting at like 2:15. I'm gonna play that thing.
Right. Oh my gosh, thank you for that. Yeah, so many gifts that we receive at younger ages that we return to feels like such an important lesson, so important. There was another person that had their hand up. Who was it? Oh, no? I thought there was one more. And there were, Nia, could you say the other 2 questions that we had there? By chance, do you have those?
I do not have them on
All
my hands.
good, all good, my dear. There is something that was really about the question I'd like to ask you all before asking if there's any questions out here. Because this is the question, Klancy, that you said you may not have an answer to. How do you make a team? How do you make a team and do this work collectively, get the support you need? What is that math?
I have to say, I maybe have 2 answers, and I'm trying to figure out the third, because part of me doesn't know. That's one answer. The other thing I can say is that sometimes people come to you. You know, when I was working, when the crowdfunder was out and there was news about the magazine, people reached out to me. Martine Thompson was an intern, and she did an amazing job with many things, but also social media. And she did it for like a year, and she had to go on and do other things. She literally just emailed me, and I looked at, and she sent her clips, and I was really impressed. And she's just a wonderful, sweet human and incredibly smart also. Other people who I collaborated with just kind of, they just kind of either reached out or they were very easy to reach out to. They had been recommended by other people. By Oriana. Do you know? Okay.
Yeah.
Oriana photographed Black food.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, of course. Yep, of course. In any case, Oriana had recommended some people who were very welcome to collaborating. So that's one answer. Sometimes people are just there, just connected to you, and you didn't know it. The other answer is you do need funds, period. You have to pay people. And so you need money to be able to pay people. And so you have to figure that whole thing out. Those are my answers.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like there is this dynamism to these questions and the answers that can change over time once we get more information. And so I would love for there to be an opportunity for folks that have this curiosity spurred from this conversation or the fact that you've already read the book from cover to cover. What are some of the questions that you have for any of the folks here on this panel right now in this moment? Oh, you were talking to me when you arrived about how you were coming here today. Could you tell that story? Back here. Oh. You got it? I am pointing at you, Shakira. I am.
Trying. She's trying.
She really, she tried to freeze.
She's trying.
She tried to freeze, like if I freeze, they can't see me.
Yes. So funny.
You knew it was going to happen.
Oh, man. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Oh, some god babies are here. Oh, Fox, hello. My question for you is, we like to joke that in the kitchen, we don't have recipes. Our ancestors just whisper in our ear and tell us how we season or how should we nourish ourselves. So my question for you, for each of you, is which ancestor is in the kitchen with you and guiding your hand and your pot.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Well, my dad definitely, my dad is in this room, but also my dad is one of, the greatest food influences in my life. And also my great-great-grandmother Salimatu, yeah, she's also in there. A lot of wisdom, a lot of plant knowledge, and a sense of healing. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. George, I'm going to call you out. You hang out with cooks a lot. What's up? You hang out with cooks a lot.
I do, don't I? And I say that I'm food adjacent. I'm not a food person, but at this point, I might as well start saying that.
Yeah.
I still don't consider myself a food person because I'm thoroughly unimpressed with the industry as a whole. For good reasons. The person who is my North Star is my favorite person, and she is my living legend, my 100-year-old grandmother. Yeah. And I've said this many times, she is the origin of everything that is good in me. She is, and she has given me, and I've always been a little old man. I was a little kid who was just always just kind of like speaking like this. I was that little kid. And she has really imbued me with a spirituality that I bring into everything I do. But there's someone in this audience who is a dear friend. I'm not going to call her out because she's gonna. No, I'm not going to. That we have had a lot of spiritual conversations over the years, and I am going to. That's why I'm not going to say who it is. There's a phrase that we use with each other, junior ancestor, that she is someone of deep spiritual importance to me. And we, over the years, have formed this really beautiful exchange of ideas and conversations for years that have impacted a lot of how I think about things. And I'm very grateful to her. Yes.
Oh, thank you for that.
I think my mom is with me in the kitchen frequently and always telling me to add more vegetables. That is her, that's her influence.
I love that.
Yeah.
So clear, right?
Yes.
No mixed messages.
Yes, more vegetables always.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that question. It really is important for me to be listening in the kitchen. And I do consider plants ancestors as well. It's a constant, ongoing conversation. And so I was grateful for both of you introducing me to ingredients that I have never cooked with before, that I was able to share with all of y'all through your recipes. So that always feels like a gift, like a new relationship. And in the human plane, I'm going to say it's my grandma Lovey. And my grandma Lovey is my mom's grandmother. And one of the best compliments I've been given in my life is to be told that I'm the Lovey of my generation. Because there's something real about that matriarch that has such a depth of care, not only for the caretaking and stewarding of next generations, but a righteous instillment of a message that comes through the food that you will survive. And in stark times, that feels like, I think, and I can imagine how it could have felt for her, given the stories I know about her life. But there's something about taking a bite of food each time and knowing that's part of my tradition, that she wants me to live. So that's just the sweetness of those relationships in the kitchen. So thank you for that question. There is another? You have a question? Yeah.
I don't so much have a question
Am I not projecting? Do I have to do this? It's not so much a question as I wanted to thank you for your words. It's so important to listen to people that you resonate with speak. And so the words you were saying about being a polymath and the space we have to occupy as Black people, as Black women, it was like alchemy for me. And I just want you to know that. I was telling Salimatu when she's sitting here briefly, I'm a chef and an artist too, not at your levels, but, and I always felt like a flake for occupying so many spaces. Like, I make art, I write a book, I do health coaching, I'm a chef, an assistant chef. Like, I always feel like a flake and find myself apologizing to people when they ask me what I do, because I do so many things and I feel like a nut. And when you said that, it literally, alchemy is the word that comes to my mind. It made me feel valid for taking the journey, the convoluted journey I've taken. I just want to say thank you for all of you sitting up there.
Thank you.
And I'll offer purposeful journey instead of convoluted. I want to offer that. You had something you wanted to share?
Just following up with that, you know, when you live in this country as a Black person, you're constantly made to feel like you're crazy for being who we are, which is different than everybody else. And it's one of the virtues I've seen of being an immigrant, is that I've never subscribed to an American ideal of success. Even as that little old man, I was like, nah. And who we are as Black people it is embedded in our DNA. We're just curious about everything. And we're good. We're just naturally good at a lot of different things. And we spend a lot of time apologizing for that, for our curiosity about crafts and fields outside of what society, American society, tells us should be the focus, because you have to be a master of your craft. When, you know, as a teenager, I remember just thinking, that language does not sound right, and it doesn't apply to me. And so we, in addition to being around chefs, I'm around a lot of people who also do a lot of things. Everyone on this panel is a polymath. And we do it so easily that we forget that it is still unique. It's not an average thing that you would want to be doing. And it's the difference between being a child and exploring things when that is encouraged, and then you become an adult and people tell you that you need to grow up. And those messages are cross-current, they're contradictory. And all of us embracing the fact that we do so many different things is intrinsic to who we are as a people.
Yeah, such an important daily reminder, really. And it feels like such, hi honey, it feels like such an important thing to recall. You know, when we're centering this experience of honoring specifically you, Klancy, and this project that you took on because it felt like a direction, you know, that very internal, purposeful direction. I want to be really thoughtful about the fact that you are allowing us to see our sanity in so many ways. You know, you're reinforcing our instincts for how we perceive ourselves in the world through this book. I want all of those levels that you've tended to be acknowledged and honored, because we need more of that in order to be in a sort of right relationship with this world. So important. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions that people have out here? I feel like I'm going to put one more person on notice. Is that okay? Should I? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. We have with us a sweet family. Bryant Terry, our previous chef in residence, is in the house. And I have a sneaking suspicion you may have a few words or that you'd like to offer to Klancy in this moment. Is that true, Bryant?
We love you, Clancy.
Hey! That's it. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate it. Well, what I want to share is that we did have some time to get into the food part of this book. It feels important and so essential. I love that you said, Klancy, whatever it is that someone wanted to offer is what you accepted when it came to the recipes. I am absolutely delighted by the fact that there is so much diaspora in this book. So much. It is incredible to me, and I'm gonna just ask you about some of the things that are on the other side of this curtain so we can make that transition. Some of the things that are present today for us to taste the flavors of, and for me, tasting the flavor of a thing is the tasting of the story, is the introduction to the person and their whole lineage. We have these spiced nuts that are going to be offered today, and it has a specific spice blend. I love that you had the opportunity to receive this recipe specifically because it is something that honors dynamic flavor. You know what I mean? And same with the pickled green banana salad. This idea that it's almost like chicken yassa. We know chicken yassa too. It's just something so specifically West African, and this recipe is sort of a testament to that tart and oniony creation that gives so much soul satisfaction. We have let me just remember in my mind, pickled eggs are on display over here as well. This tradition of preservation, this idea that we can actually claim our survival through our food, through the ways that we learn how to be with food. And that preserved pickled egg is that example for me of, wait a second, you can't do it immediately. You gotta wait 5 days, maybe 2 weeks before you can have this. It's gotta maturate, you know what I mean? And so that relationship also of, it's not instant gratification sometimes. Sometimes it's really putting up, and it is having a slow relationship and learning really well so that you can continue to have the relationship with some food ways that are part of our Black food traditions. And we also have, my memory is going to serve me, I promise, we also have your chestnut mini cakes. And it is so Parisian. Can you tell us why you included that recipe?
Some of the recipes are very practical. For example, Janine Copeland's spiced nuts. She was telling the story of how she had become manager at a wine bar in DC, and she wanted to add some more interesting things to the menu, snacky things. And so that was an example of something that she added. So very, very specific, practical link to her interview. For me, the Parisian mini cakes, it's kind of it's part of my origin story in terms of my path of being a pastry cook. It started in Paris, where I went to culinary school, and I had an apprenticeship at Taïwan, and we made chestnut cakes. And so it was one of the easiest recipes I've ever seen, period, for anything baked. It's just chestnut puree and eggs, and I sometimes add chocolate, and it's got butter. And I just thought it was it relates to my story, and it's also an easy recipe. It's gluten-free. So, yeah.
It's so beautiful. And it is both. You also have a recipe that I was able to jump into based on Klancy's recommendation, the palm nut cream cheesecake. Seriously.
It's so good.
The palm nut cream cheesecake kind of originated from, I grew up cooking Nigerian food. My family's from Nigeria, and, we don't have a lot of desserts. The desserts are oftentimes mixed, we have puff puff, but then sometimes you'll eat puff puff with the savory food. So there isn't kind of this very separate dessert that I could pull from. And so when I was cooking these Nigerian food pop-ups, I was like, okay, I gotta do something for dessert, and so how can I kind of reference some of my favorite flavors and ingredients? And so we have a soup called banga soup. The Nigerians in the audience might know banga soup, but it's a palm nut cream soup. It's very rich and lots of like that beautiful orange oil that floats to the top. And so I made a cheesecake using that as the base. So it's also gluten-free and it's a vegan option. And yeah, it's kind of my take on what Nigerian dessert could look like.
And I love that moment of communication or conversations, like calling back to your ancestors. Hey, we got to have another option. Tell me what's up. You know what I mean? It's like we have the ingredients. What's the new way? What's the remix? What's the possibility? And I love how that's reflected in many ways in the recipes in this book also. Mm-hmm. We also have some pine and ginger punch. Yeah. Admittedly, I made it non-alcoholic. We'll say I took some poetic license. But just that pineapple, ginger, mint, you know, like that combination of flavors is so reminiscent of so many pieces of the and parts of the diaspora. So thank you for collecting all of those expressions together in the midst of this project where you are taking time for Black women and femmes in food to really see what is possible when it comes to how we say, tell, show our stories, how we're present in this world. And you'll see in this altar some of those ingredients from those recipes, like the yes, the one that you recommended. I was like, oh, I have to get that specific name brand because that matters, right? Sometimes that brand matters. But these ingredients are here to be part of this storytelling. There's something about looking it in the face and not just taking the bite. So please take some moments of interacting here before going there so you can have that intimacy of connection. And if there are no other questions, I'd love to take that time to feed y'all. But first, let's thank every single one person here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did today. It is beautiful that you are here. Thank you, my dear. And you are going to be at Omnivore tomorrow?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
With Shakira.
Yes, with Shakira in conversation. Omnivore Bookstore.
Yes.
And you'll be leaving us after that, but I feel like you'll just sort of move back or something.
Yes. Trip number 2 is already in the works.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you so much, my dear.